want to try something a little different. We had to pay off some federales, get through some roads. I did that trip when I was 19, and I'd gone to Costa Rica the year before that with a buddy, and then we flew to Nicaragua the next year.
Welcome to the Rivers and Tides podcast, where we have guests on to discuss healing and resiliency through spending time in nature and outdoor pursuits. Charlie Mogul, thanks for coming on the podcast today. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
So, got to start out by saying you're one of the rare breed around here in that you're a Charleston native, aren't you?
Charleston native, born and raised, grew up here. Good place to grow up.
Yeah. Did you, where in Charleston did you grow up at?
I grew up in Mount Pleasant, so just on the north side of downtown Charleston.
And were your parents from here?
My parents are not from here. Originally, they're from Maryland, and then they moved here. My grandfather lived here for a while, and he got sick, and then they came here to take care of him and ended up staying. And so ended up being here my whole life, and kind of a great place to be.
So tell me what it was like growing up here. I mean, were you, did you spend a lot of time outdoors? Did you grow up fishing?
Yeah, I grew up fishing. My dad and my grandfather always had boats. My grandfather had some sport fishers growing up and some offshore boats, and we always had a skiff growing up, so I was always around it. We weren't sitting inside playing video games growing up, so we were outside playing a lot, and just running around, getting in trouble, doing as much outdoors as we could.
Did you spend a lot of time going to the beach, spending time with friends on the ocean?
A big surfer. That was kind of my first big passion. I was super big into surfing, so I was doing that a lot. Was kind of a little hellion at the time and a little surf rat, so I'd go do that stuff a lot.
How old were you when you started surfing, would you say?
I think I was 6 years old when I got my first surfboard.
Pretty young.
And I was die hard about it. So I did that a lot, spent a lot of time at the beach in the water, and dad and grandfather always taking me fishing as well, so it was kind of always something we were doing every weekend when we had free time, stuff like that. Not doing school sports and stuff, we ended up going fishing.
Did you guys have a kind of a crew that you would go surfing with?
Yeah, I had a tight little group of buddies. And we would kind of, we ended up all becoming surf instructors in middle school and high school, working for a surf company. So I had a tight little group of like 3 or 4 guys where, we were always together. Once we could drive, we were surfing every chance we got.
Where would you mostly surf around here?
Typically we go to Folly, surf the washout, which is kind of the, more local big wave spot around here for an East Coast spot. Nothing crazy as far as big waves, but the best spot in town.
Did you travel at all to surf when you were that age?
Yeah, we traveled a lot. We'd do road trips down to Florida, rent RVs, and, we'd do a lot of Florida trips, Outer Banks trips. Eventually started going abroad, going to Costa Rica, Nicaragua.
Wow.
Really getting after it, yeah.
Where would you say your favorite place to surf was in the U.S.?
I've surfed California a few times. I lived there for 6 months. And
whereabouts?
In San Diego.
Okay.
And I did a lot of surfing there while I was there. It's just more consistent there, good surfing. But I've had amazing days in Outer Banks and amazing days here, and some really great days down in Florida. So kind of all over. I don't have a specific spot. If I had to pick one to go to and I knew that there was going to be a good forecast, it would probably be like Sebastian Inlet or New Smyrna, Florida.
What about internationally?
Nicaragua was very cool. Really liked that. Still, they were communists up until like 24 years ago, something like that. So it felt a little more dangerous being down there, which was kind of a fun aspect for me. We had to pay off some federales and get through some roads. And
this makes it a little more exciting. Yeah. How old were you when you did that?
I did that trip when I was 19. And I'd gone to Costa Rica the year before that with a buddy, and then we flew to Nicaragua the next year. Want to try something a little different. So that was a ton of fun and really good waves, great surfing.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. The San Diego's, I always tell people, because when I was in the Marines, I was stationed at Camp Pendleton for a little while, and as far as climate, it doesn't get much better.
Yeah.
Every day is Groundhog Day. It's 80 degrees,
right.
Sunny and dry, and it's a great place as far as climate, not necessarily to live.
Right. Yeah. Expensive.
And crowded.
When I lived there, I was surfing before and after work every day, and I really enjoyed my time there. I was lucky to go spend some time there.
So, I ask this pretty much everybody. How was high school for you? I mean, was that were you a good student, or was that like the surfing?
Yeah,
fishing was the priority.
I'd say it was more of a social thing for me. I was not a bad student. I hated studying. Like, I couldn't sit down and study to save my life. but I was good enough to just sit down, take a test, and get a B, or that was good enough for me. I didn't need to go try super hard to get straight A's, and I didn't want to try that hard. But it's funny, I went to public school here until 6th grade, and then 7th grade, I was fortunate enough to have my grandparents and my uncle wanted to send me to a private school here, and I purposely tried to fail the entrance test. And I know I failed it, and they still let me in, so I assume they just wanted the money. But I ended up making a really, tight group of friends at that school, and, made my way through, and, ended up going to college afterwards, and, I made it. So,
where'd you go to college?
I went to Wofford College in upstate South Carolina. Went there, had no clue what I was going to do in life. Still, just kind of figuring out where I wanted to be and where I wanted to live and jobs and all that, and had a little bit of pressure to, go on that whole track of, get a job, work in corporate job, start a family, do all that. And so I did that for a few years after I graduated, and just decided I was done with it and wasn't happy doing it and wanted to do something else. Made the jump.
What was your major?
So I majored in finance and accounting, double majored. Graduated, had no clue what I was going to do still with that. The expectation on me was probably to go work for a bank or become an accountant or something like that. And I'm not a math mind. I just had to force myself through that major, essentially. And eventually got to the point where I was like, all right, my family's worked in real estate. I'm going to go try the real estate gig out. So I went and worked for a real estate developer for a few years and kind of applied what I learned in school to that. But from there, I was, sitting in a fluorescent office building for a couple of years, and you kind of get tired of that pretty quick.
So what came after that?
Just dove headfirst into guiding.
I just decided I'm going to go for it.
You go for it. Yeah, I didn't really go part-time or anything. I was in the development world, real estate-wise, we'd work on a project, and we would have, certain milestones or deadlines we would hit, and then I'd have a lot of time in between those milestones. So, we would have a month of 30 days of waiting to hit a certain milestone, and I'd have, 20 days off where I wasn't really doing much. So I would just go fish during the week. And luckily I had a really cool boss, and he was fine with me doing that. So I was fishing, 3-4 days a week while I was working that job. And I just said, I'd rather be doing this every day and not be sitting in fluorescent lights. And it's kind of how I got to where I'm at now.
Were you going out with people on their skiffs? I mean, did you have friends with skiffs and
so
getting out on?
We, growing up, like I said, we had skiffs. My dad had a Maverick. We had a Hughes at one point. And so I made some money in that real estate job, and, my boss, his main advice first time I got a little bit of money behind me, he was like, don't spend it on toys. And I turned around and bought a skiff, like within the first 6 months of working in that job. So I had kind of my dream skiff at the time. And,
what was it?
I got a Hell's Bay Waterman.
Nice.
And, I was just super happy. I'd always wanted one of those boats. I'd seen guys around here running them, and, just happened to, fall into the right job at the right time, make some money, and be able to buy the boat I wanted to buy. And so I was fishing that boat a lot.
Just with friends and
with friends. And
now, were you always? When did the fly fishing piece of it start?
Yeah, so fly fishing has been around for me and my family a long time. My dad was a huge fly fisherman. He'd traveled the world, chasing rooster fish, bonefish, tarpon, doing the whole thing. So he's the one who got me into it. And he actually got me into tying flies first. So as like a little kid craft, I was tying flies for him. And I hadn't picked up a fly rod for probably 2 or 3 years before, I was tying flies. And then one day I just found one of his old rods down the garage, and I was like, all right, I'm going to go try this thing out. And just hopped around a bunch of neighborhood ponds, catching bass and carp. And eventually that led to trying to find redfish and going wading. And so before I had a boat, I was, try to find spots to wade out and catch fish, and, just being a little marsh rat, essentially.
So you, when you got your skiff, you were heading out, you were mostly fly fishing?
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love spin fishing. You can go bang them up pretty good with a spin rod, but something about fly fishing I gravitated to more. I like to kind of attribute it like it's akin to the bow hunting of the hunting world. It's just a little harder, a little more technical. You're more hunting and seeking out fish versus just, setting some bait out and waiting. So to me, it was more active. I wasn't just sitting there waiting, and I don't have the most patience in the world, or I didn't at the time. So I had to really kind of figure out a way to kind of stay on the move and find fish. And
I think it makes it that much more. We've talked about this in some of the other podcasts. That just because it's harder when it all comes together. It definitely
was super rewarding. Yeah,
pretty rewarding,
extremely rewarding. So I've enjoyed that about it, and it's a puzzle that's always changing. Variables of weather and tide and the fish movements and the seasons and flies, and it just hasn't gotten old yet. So to me, it's nice to be able to always have to change it up, figure out the puzzle, and kind of find where the next fish is going to be.
It's not a bad office sitting on a skip.
It's not, yeah.
Now, did you get your captain's license before or after you got your boat?
So I didn't have my captain's license for the first few years of owning that boat. And then as I was fishing 3-4 days a week at my old job, I decided, I'm going to start getting paid to do this. So I got my captain's license, and from there just started taking people out, family, friends, and buddies, and, my buddies' parents or anyone who would really book me at the time. And from there, it kind of just snowballed to where I'm at today. And, I think it was the best decision I've ever made. So pretty happy about that.
So when you decided to be a guide full time, when did you feel like comfortable enough and confident enough in the waters and finding fish to make that decision to go for it?
Well, growing up here, I had a pretty good idea of, where to find fish and how to catch them. So it never was like too much of a curve. I mean, I guess my learning curve was like, my whole, youth growing up was that whole time period for me. I kind of got it figured out a little bit. So it wasn't hard as far as finding fish. If you pull a bank long enough or you get on just about any flat, you'll see something eventually. So it just kind of started there.
Yeah, it's easy, right? Yeah, sure.
It's easy. I mean, I guess,
being new to this, it's not easy. I wish I could, like the Matrix, where I could just, get that info out of your head.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's, you make it sound easy.
Yeah.
And I've been out with you fishing a number of times now, so you do make it look easy.
Yeah. I think once you do, it's just a time on task thing. The longer you do it, the more you get a feel for where you should be and where the fish should be. And, you get a little bit of fish-tism, you all of a sudden kind of starts clicking for you.
To come together.
Yeah. You get the puzzle pieces put together a little bit, and then it, becomes less of a job of finding them and just a job of hooking them.
So, and then the name of your guiding company is Fly Fish Charleston.
Yep, Fly Fish Charleston.
How long has it been called that? For a while.
It's been called that for 3.5 years. It used to be Going Coastal Charters, and I had that for maybe 2 years. And I just decided that was too tongue in cheek and needed to kind of be a little more professional, so I switched it up, kind of did a whole rebrand, and it's been good from there. That's kind of the idea.
And you recently got rid of your first skiff and got a new skiff.
Yeah, so I've got a new skiff now, which I love. It's been a great boat. As far as fishing wise, it does everything the Waterman would do, a little better, a little faster, a little lighter. So I'm pretty happy with it.
Yeah, so I took a ride with Charlie to get his new skiff, and we went down to Florida 7.5 hours each one way, and then turned around, picked it up, and drove all the way back in the same day. That was quite the long day, but
15-hour
made
day.
it.
Yeah.
Oh, we leave at 4 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah, 4 in the morning. I appreciate you coming down there with me to get it.
Fun.
Yeah, it was exciting. Getting a new boat's always exciting.
That's cool. So, I mean, it's the main reason we're doing this podcast is, to talk about, to get out there and across the people who might be suffering from mental health issues or drug addiction or just whatever, having a hard time, about how healing, spending time in nature can be. In your case, fishing is probably the main thing for you.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if you could just talk a little bit about what that, how that's helped you, how fishing has helped you get through difficult times and spending time in nature and what that's meant for you.
Yeah. So growing up, was probably as long as I can remember, I've dealt with like major depression for a long time, since middle school. I would say is kind of when I first noticed it. And, it was a lot of rough kind of times in my family life at the time with my parents, and a lot of yelling and screaming and fighting. And, it wasn't, the most glamorous thing to be at home around all that stuff all the time. So getting out and getting away from it and kind of, in a way, disappearing from that was my escape, I think. And, fishing for me is just something that I can think about every day and kind of get my mind off of that stuff. And it makes it a lot easier now. That's my full-time job, where, I get to be in the best office on earth and do what I love to do every single day. So in that aspect, it's really helped, just my mental health and just feeling better about everything I'm doing. And, there's a lot of pressure growing up where you're supposed to, go to school, get a job, or go to college, get a degree, get a job. And I just ended up, kind of throwing that all to the wind. I did it. I, did what I was technically supposed to do, and I wasn't loving what I was doing. I wasn't happy in life. So I just made a total 180 change and decided not to listen to anybody else but myself and just kind of go after what I wanted to do. So in a way, fly fishing and guiding and just being out here has totally saved my life. A lot of times I'd had some really dark times and dark places and dark thoughts where, I thought it'd be easier just not to be here. And since I've gotten into this more, it's kind of, all that's kind of washed away and a lot happier.
And you lost your father at a young age, right?
Yeah, he passed away 2.5 years ago, or a little less than 2.5 years ago now. Diagnosed with cancer, late stage cancer, and within 2 months of his diagnosis, he passed away. And he and I had a rocky relationship the last few years of his life. And so, I'd like to say probably my biggest regret is just not, letting a lot of that stuff go and just kind of, being around him more. And, we were estranged for a few years. And, if I could go back in time, I would and do it differently.
Yeah.
But it's kind of opened my eyes to, how short life is and, kind of do whatever is going to make you happy in life, because you never know how quickly it's going to end.
Got to make the most of the time you have here.
Exactly.
Sure.
And you have no idea how long you have.
When you were younger, were you actually diagnosed with?
Yeah, diagnosed. I'd been on antidepressants, anxiety medicine, and kind of tried a whole gamut of things, and nothing really ever worked or worked long enough for me to feel like I was getting to a better place. So there's a lot of that, trial and error stuff where you're trying to get it figured out, and it just wasn't getting anywhere. But I can say what really has made me feel the best in life is, being on a skiff, being out here fishing. All that stuff fades away as soon as I pull away from the boat ramp.
Yeah, you said, I've talked about this in some other podcasts, and I think that's the biggest thing is, it's when you're in an overseas environment, let's say for military veterans or whatever, things are very black and white if you're in an area where it's a conflict zone or a war zone, and you're just focused on what's going on at that moment with the people that you're there with. And I think similar with a skiff, when you're out fishing, you're just focused on that. And everything else is left behind.
Exactly.
It's definitely a time gives you time to heal and clear your brain and just get away from everything.
Yeah, totally. That's a great escape.
Yeah, it is. Did you, you said to me recently, the last 3 years are probably the happiest you've been.
Yeah, definitely.
And you think that just spending time doing what you love to do?
Yeah, from a financial standpoint, it's not I'm not going to retire anytime soon, but, that's not the most important thing in the world to me anymore. So being able to just, be happy and feel good and, create great relationships with people. And I get to meet so many awesome people all the time doing this. So, I'm getting a school of hard knocks education and whatever these guys do, I get a CEO or a marketing guy or whoever it is, I'm learning all this stuff from them, and I'm sure they're learning a little bit from me, hopefully. But yeah, it's just a way to kind of totally remove myself from all the bad stuff that I had to deal with growing up. And, I'm the boss. I don't have to listen to anybody else. I can make my own schedule. That part about it's really nice, just, having to be able to kind of choose your own path and drive your way down it,
Yeah, there's a lot of studies about, spending time outside doing things like we're talking about in nature and finding things that you love to do outside. It is equal to or better than any prescription drug that you could possibly take.
Totally agree. Yeah. You could, be making $1 million a year and be the most unhappy person on earth, or you can make nothing and be doing this every day and really be happy.
Yeah.
And, it kind of goes back to you don't know how long you have. And, I would like to think, when I'm laying on my deathbed, I could say, wow, I got to fish every day of my life versus, well, I wish I worked a couple more days.
Yeah. Or had a little more money.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have pockets when you get buried.
Guess what my buddy used to tell me, you can't be buried with it.
Yeah.
So, is the social part of guiding and spending time, and not just guiding, I guess, but even when you're just not guiding or out fishing with friends, or is that social part of it a big part of it for you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, just being able to spend time with people you want to spend time with is huge. Obviously there's some guys you get on the boat, you're like, all right, I can't wait for this day to be over. But, being around like-minded people who kind of see things the same way and, obviously similar interests, similar hobbies. I mean, it's totally, creates lifelong lasting relationships and things that are just way nicer to be around than people you don't want to be talking to about, what's the Dow doing? What's the market look like? Things you don't care about, you're not going to spend too much time invested in.
Yeah, it's interesting. You said you learned something from people that come out on the boat with you, and I've always approached life that way. Is that I feel like even people I don't like, I've got something to learn from them. I mean, I approach that from that to. That's my approach to pretty much everybody. Is I'm always trying to learn something from people that I interact with or meet.
Right. Yeah, and I think in the fishing world and the guiding world. Some people get a little complacent. They just go to their, same 5 spots, and eventually those spots aren't going to work the same. So for me, it's like you're consistently finding something new, trying to find something new. Always meeting new people. It's just an ever-changing puzzle. Is like the best way I can describe it is, you got to just figure out the puzzle every day, which is, takes your mind off a lot of other stuff.
What's the future look like for you? What do you think for Fly Fish Charleston?
Well, just hope to keep growing the business. I don't see myself stopping doing this for a long time. Something I'm going to try to do for as long as I can. I'm physically able to do it. Where if that takes me to other places, I would like to go fish other places and maybe guide somewhere else and get out of town for a little bit. But Charleston will always be home for me. So at some point I'll be back here.
Have you had clients tell you afterwards, or clients express to you how much being out fishing means to them and how it's helped them?
Yeah, I think it definitely does. And I've had people tell me that, part of being a guide nowadays, you're not just a fishing guide. You're a fishing guide, you're a meteorologist, you're a social media guy, you're a photographer, you're a therapist. I've had full-grown men have full-on come aparts in the boat, and I just have to calm them down and say, look, it's just a fish. It's got 10 brain cells, and we'll find the next one. So, yeah, I mean, you get guys who, you got to kind of learn something from them, and sometimes they learn from you. And, I'm a young guy, but hopefully, I've got a little bit of wisdom I can impart on people who are having hard times and deal with that stuff. So,
well, before we end the podcast, is there anything else you want to add? Any other thoughts you have, or any advice you'd give to somebody else? That's
I mean, if you're struggling, if you got whether it be tough family life, or you hate your job, or you're just not happy where you are in life, just sometimes it takes making that jump. It's the hardest thing in the world to do, to want to say, hey, I'm gonna totally uproot my life or do a 180, and everyone might be telling you to do something else, and if it doesn't feel right, you should go with what your gut's telling you to do. And for me at least, it worked out, and I could see it working out for other people, hopefully.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks again for coming on.
Appreciate it, man. Yeah, thank you.